Hi everybody, I'm Gigi. I'm a Coptic homeschooling mom of 4 kids, ages 7, 5, 4, and almost 2. And we've been homeschooling for 4 years, so right from the very beginning when our first was in preschool. And we've been being asked a lot to answer some questions about homeschooling, especially to families that are thinking of starting homeschooling, what it was like for us, why we chose to homeschool, and what we've learned along the way. When I started homeschooling was not a popular thing in the Coptic community, which is an Orthodox Christian Egyptian community. So there was only really one family that I knew of that were homeschooling, and to me it felt like such an extreme approach to education and to even parenting. Like, why be so extreme? And during this church trip, I happened to be sitting with a friend of, like, the father of the family, and I asked him, I'm like, why such an extreme approach? Like, we all went through the school system, and maybe I should mention that my husband and I we went through the school system. I was in the public system and my husband was in the Catholic system. We both had a very positive experience. We were both very strong in academics. Both of us were involved in athletics. We had friends. There were obviously some negative experiences as well, but nothing that I felt was traumatic or like, I don't want my kids to ever go through something like that or anything like that. So when I kind of asked that man that was homeschooling his children, he said, well, did we really go through school and we're totally fine? Because I'm like, we were all fine. He's like, how fine were we? Just think about it. And he, like, during the conversation, I really was the opposite side of the argument. I was like, homeschooling is just too different. It's completely against the norm. And in that conversation, he said several things that got my mind thinking, but the two that really sat with me were, for one, he's like, how is it fair that a complete stranger to me, and even if she is the best teacher in the world, which chances are she probably won't be, but how come she or he, this teacher that gets chosen randomly for my children, gets to spend way more time with my child than I do? He's like, the teacher gets to spend maybe from 8 to 3, from 9 to 2 even. And by the time I finish my work and sit with my children, I have like the remnants of time. And usually that time is actually allotted to doing homework that the teacher decided is important or that the ministry decided is important. So I have such little time to really sit with my child or try to teach them anything that I personally find important. The second thing he said that also really sat with me was, if all else fails, and God willing, it won't all fail, but if all else fails, what is the one thing I want my children to really learn in their life? Is it strong academics? Is it strong skills with their peers? Is it how to be really savvy business-wise? What is it? And he's like, for our family, it's discipling them in the way of the Lord, in the way of Christ. And that really sat with me. I'm like, that really is my priority. At the end of the day, I want my children to be, to make good Christian choices, to have like God in their forefront of their mind all the time, whether it's in their academic career or in their business career or in their social life, whatever, but everything needs to be done with like a Christ perspective, a Christian perspective. And I felt that he's right in that homeschooling would probably give the best of this particular thing. It would definitely highlight the Christian perspective the most, even more than private Christian schools that have so many different pressures from different parts, like parents and the academics and all that, which again isn't bad, but it's present and competing. So I went home after that trip and I researched big time. And both me and my husband were not for homeschooling. We had never even talked about it as an option. And I researched and I focused a lot of my research on the negatives of homeschooling because I wanted so much to know, like, I wanted to be convinced that this is just a bad idea. But the negative research was very weak. And I mean, as a homeschooler, you listening to that, it could be easy to say like, well, yeah, because you're homeschooling, so it's hard to see the negatives of something that you believe in. But I promise you, at that time, I did not believe in it yet. And I wasn't compelled by it. I wasn't convinced by it yet, but the research was not strong. I come from a science background. I was pharmacist once upon a time. So I was taught so much to research and see the evidence and see the trends and things like that. And that's really what I was looking for. So the research was strongly in favor of homeschooling when it comes to academic performance, surprisingly even social skills, eloquence while speaking, all kinds of things like that seemed to favor homeschooling students. So with a lot more research and support from that family, we kind of decided, like, our first child was just in preschool, so we'll just try that route for now and kind of see if it doesn't go through. Like, all we did was mess up preschool, which isn't really a huge deal. So that's kind of how we got into homeschooling, and through the years I just fell more and more in love with it for so many different reasons. So the other thing I wanted to mention today is the foreseen advantages. Okay, so what are some good things that you can expect with homeschooling? You can teach whatever you want. This year for my first grader, he's learning Coptic right along with me because I did not know Coptic, but I found these pieces of curriculum online, I pieced them together, and we're learning Coptic, which is so awesome. We go to midweek liturgies all the time. We can create our entire year's calendar around the Coptic calendar if we want. We can do whatever we want. We have, if everything is moving smoothly and ideally, we have a service each week. So I've taken the kids to like food bank. We do tons of field trips. So it's just been so liberating and empowering and such a great outlet for me to take all like the energy that I had inside me to like even work or have my own career, and I'm kind of like channeling it all towards my children. You can teach however you want. So we start our school year at Nairuz, the beginning of the Coptic year, which is a little bit later than the school starts, the standard school starts. So it's about a week later, and we start it with Mass, and we start it with Nairuz themed topics and stuff like that, and that's been really, really cool. We also do school September to May, so we have June, July, and August off, but I'm kind of learning that completely off is actually not the best approach, especially with kids that young. Some structure for me and for them is beneficial. So this year we're keeping a little bit of structure and like core programs like math and language here and there, but not as intense as the rest of the year. So it's also trial and error and seeing how your kids like it, how you like it, and just kind of learning how to make the best of it. I'm able, this is another advantage to homeschooling, I'm able to speak like truth and love and encouragement into my children all the time. Not just daily, you guys, like hourly. Like, see them pass by, give them a hug, and tell them how awesome they are, how hardworking they are, how much God is in love with them, how much God has a plan for them and a purpose for them. And that continuous encouragement and support is so fruitful. I see it like literally physically in their eyes, in their bodies, in their demeanor. And I get a lot of questions about like, but what about like the fact that you're taking away so much challenge, like bullying at school or facing difficult teachers or whatever. And that's very present in my mind. I don't take away all challenges. As a matter of fact, I try really hard to step back when acceptable challenges present themselves, which they do so often. Our family dynamics is very close, like much closer than if the kids were each in a separate classroom. So they watch out for each other. They understand like the fact that we have a toddler and sometimes she's not logical and we have to kind of give in to her. And it's really sweet to see them kind of learning the family dynamic and supporting their siblings. Okay, so I wanted to talk about also the foreseen disadvantages. For one, the thing that I learned and I kind of saw coming, but it's like my biggest thing for people who are homeschooling is expect burnout for the principal teaching parent. So I was at a homeschooling conference one time and somebody said that in their talk. They said, don't kind of try to fight burnout and say, if it happens, this is kind of what I will do. expect it. Like burnout will happen. You will get there. So kind of have a strategy in place once you start hitting a wall, what you're going to do to try to like regain or recenter. And a great thing about homeschooling is that you'll find a lot of gatherings and groups in your community. There are a lot of other homeschooling families. So you become part of co-ops, which are meetups where the kids kind of like play gym class together and do photography electives together and stuff like that. And as a mom, I get to hang out with other moms as well who share their burnout stories and their burnout strategies, and I can have ideas and support and encouragement. So I've heard so many moms say like, take a week off. Take a week off. And I'm like, what? You can do that? Like, won't the kids be behind? It turns out, you guys, they are not going to be behind it like at all, because I always try to remember this. The curriculum that is set in place is not set in place like written in stone. Every single human needs to learn these facts by this time. And this was a learning process for me, because coming from an Egyptian academic background, I want so much to not just be on par with my peers. I want to far surpass them, be the best. And I want that for my children. Another foreseen disadvantage, or two of them that I had found, remember when I told you I researched homeschool way in the beginning and I was focusing on the negative research? Two things that kind of stood out to me were test-taking skills and presentation skills. So those two things are weaker in homeschool children. And I knew that from before my children were even school age. So I wanted so much to focus on these things. And it makes sense, because test-taking skills, like now with my first grader, when he takes a spelling test and I'm watching him and he gets 8 out of 10, there's 2 mistakes there. It's not wise of me as a homeschooling teacher to just take the sheet and be like, okay, great, you got 8 out of 10, moving on. Because I have every opportunity, if I want, to just be like, okay, so you got those 2 like words wrong. Can you rewrite them on the whiteboard 3 more times each? And then we're gonna retake this test again. And we do that so that he can get 100%, because he can get 100% in homeschooling. It's not something like where I have 30 kids and I need to like move on to the next concept. He can get 100% in every test if I like pace him properly. Same thing with math. So for him, when there's a test, it's not this like compelling, like really scary thing. But like, it's definitely something I wanted to teach them, that tests are different. They're kind of a little bit more like serious. I want their nerves to get used to the fact that like you're being tested. So I definitely try to keep an eye out for like community competitions. In church, there's a lot of like awesome, friendly competitions like Maharagan and activities that require kind of like knowing academic material and testing. So whenever there's a test that they can do outside of the homeschool, I try to kind of make that happen. Also presentation skills, which was really important to me because I love speaking, I love presenting, I love that stuff. So I made sure that even from their young age, so this year they were in preschool, SK in grade 1, we had a presentation every month. So like I mentioned, I had unit studies. Every month was a different unit study topic, and every month ended with a presentation. So in the month where they did, for example, insects, that was the theme of the month, each one chose an insect that they loved, and we got a Bristol board, and we went to the library, got books about the insect that they chose, and they made a Bristol board and they presented it to their cousins. There are times where they present to their grandparents. There are like in the transportation unit, for example, the presentation was they had to build a car or a vehicle out of Legos. And then Mina, my husband, built like this ramp. We took it to the library and I asked a librarian to be like the judge. They had to present their vehicle, why they chose to build it the way they did. And then they raced it and in front of the librarian, which was so cute because she's like, of course I would love to do that for you, to like she's just standing there kind of listening to their presentation. So they learn how to present, and that I find is important, so I try to prioritize it. Okay, I'm gonna end with the last thing that I always get asked, and it's a valid question. It was something that I also was curious about before homeschooling as well. What about socialization? Are they going to be like these antisocial, uncomfortable people in public and stuff like that? Well, the research says that homeschooled children are at least on par socially with their peers, and a lot of research actually says that they surpass them socially. So when I read this fact, I'm like, well, how can that be if they are less, or my thought is they're less socially stimulated? First we kind of have to define socialization. What does it mean to be social? What behavior is social behavior? If it is for my first grader to be able to talk very comfortably to other first graders and I don't know, tell them his thoughts, communicate issues, deal with problems with first graders. I want to say other kids probably have more experience with that because he's not always surrounded by first graders. But my first child is a very, very social kid. And whenever he meets any kids, regardless of their age, he's just a social person. So he's always talking to them. If that's what being social means, like really just speaking to your age very comfortably, maybe kids in the school system have more practice, but they also have a lot more bad experiences from it. Like some kids get bullied, some kids get left out, whereas homeschool children don't have that experience. So they're actually more comfortable speaking to whether their age, their peers, or older or younger. Another thing is, remember that there is positive socialization and negative socialization. So positive socialization is things like, it includes communication, things like that, but it also includes courtesy, ladies first, chivalry, things like that. And I think that is actually lacking in standard school teaching. I remember I took our kids to a playground once, and we had just talked about courtesy and letting others go before you and the concept of ladies first. So my son was standing at a slide and there was a girl behind him and he said, "Go ahead, ladies first." And I remember it blew the parents away. Like, whoa, that little boy just let a girl go ahead of him. And that's a type of socialization. So there's also negative socialization, like bullying or mocking. And those things are practiced very well in the school system and not practiced in the homeschooling kind of environment. We practice actually the opposite. So we talk about examples of how to make everybody feel comfortable and loved, and how God created all of his children, loves all of his children the same, and our role in making others feel loved as well. So kind of putting it all together, socialization is not an issue in homeschooling at all. And I mean, just like you'll find antisocial kids in the school system, you will find antisocial homeschooled children, just like there are introverts and extroverts in the school system. The same is true for the homeschool system. But antisocial behavior is not linked to homeschooling, by no means. There's no, they're absolutely unrelated. We definitely go out, participate in activities regularly. Socialization is something that I know my kids are not getting as much. They're not spending, 8 to 3 outside the home like all the other kids. So it's something on my mind. So we do definitely make sure that we participate in some sports, in swimming and skating and stuff at church and the community and stuff like that. So it's definitely not something that's on the back burner, who cares? We definitely want our kids to be interacting with their peers and stuff. So it's something that as a homeschooling community, we definitely have in our mind to get them to participate and make friends and stuff like that. Well, that's it. That's all I have prepared for kind of the basics, just what you need to know about homeschooling before you even delve into it. And yeah, I would love to hear your comments, your questions, and have an awesome, awesome day.